Hi, I'm Ken Hunter from Church Doctor Ministries, and this is my story. My story about mission and becoming a missionary. I grew up in a church of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod near Detroit, Michigan. God called me into ministry during my senior year of high school. I started college at one of the denomination schools in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Then I moved on to the last 2 years of college to a school in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And while I was at that school, I launched a nonprofit ministry called Christ for Youth Today. Approximately 40 to 50 of my fellow students at that college joined me in working with area churches to reach out to youth in congregations in the Fort Wayne area and to help them share their faith with their unchurched friends. After graduating from that college, I enrolled in Concordia Seminary in St. Louis, Missouri. Several of my fellow students from the Fort Wayne College were there as well. So we incorporated in the state of Missouri a nonprofit ministry also called Christ for Youth Today. It continued and it grew and it grew. We had a 24-hour hotline for young people to call and to share their challenges. We guided them with Christian principles and prayed for them over the phone. We also provided events at local churches throughout the St. Louis area. We developed a Christian coffee house at Washington University in St. Louis, and that was located in the Lutheran Center at that university. When I graduated from the seminary, most of my classmates went on to pastor congregations. A few of my classmates went on to mission school at another location. Why? Because they were called to be foreign missionaries. I stayed for graduate school and entered the 3-year doctoral program. Why? I was looking for outreach strategies that I did not receive in my undergraduate and master's degree programs. After 3 years, I received a PhD in theology, but still had very little exposure to mission strategies. I'm grateful for the education, which was very, very good, but I still had no training in mission strategy. Having exhausted all my educational options, at least so I thought, I was placed in a church in Detroit, Michigan. It was an inner city congregation that had declined by 67% the previous decade before I arrived. The community around the church was racially mixed, with many older Anglo people, along with numerous young, unchurched African American families. With a passion for outreach to the unchurched, I led some of my members of my church in an evangelism program, training about 20 people. We had little success with the elderly Anglo population in our community, and nothing seemed to work cross-culturally with the young African American families in our community. Discouraged, I talked with my mission executive of the Michigan district, and I said, I don't know what to do here. Everything we tried for outreach to these young African American families doesn't seem to work. The response? The mission executive shared, we don't know what to do either. We've already closed a number of churches in the Detroit area. I was really discouraged, but I decided to call my denominational headquarters and talk to the mission executive there, and the response was very similar. He shared with me, we really don't know what to do. We're not very good at reaching cross-culturally in urban areas. And then I asked, well, all right, is there any church in any other denomination or non-denominational church that is growing by reaching African Americans as an Anglo congregation? And the executive literally said to me, "We don't talk to them." I became very discouraged, and I wondered if I should even be a pastor. But I refused to believe that we couldn't reach the young, unchurched African-American families. God answered my prayer and spoke to my frustration, but it came in a way I least expected. Back then, it was called junk mail, and pastors got a lot of it. It was just a postcard from a seminary I'd never heard of in California. The postcard explained that several very effective American career missionaries who had served all over the world had returned to this California seminary to teach American pastors missiology. Missiology? I had to look up the word. The postcard explained that this training was for busy pastors. It concluded in a Doctor of Ministry degree in an area of missions. I really didn't need another degree, as my wife reminded me, but the mission possibility stirred my soul. The teaching was organized as 2 weeks at a time, 3 times a year, for 3 years. Prior to each 2-week session, I was required to read several books, hundreds and hundreds of pages of assigned mission teaching from these mission professors. And after each class, I was required to write a paper about what I learned and how I would use it to help my own church. As my wife and I discussed this possibility, she asked, "Are you going to school the rest of your life?" My response was the same. I refuse to believe that we Lutherans, or anybody of any denomination, can't reach unchurched people of any color or race. I just need to try it. I'm going to go for 1 session, and if it's not what I'm looking for, yeah, and you're right, I said to my wife, I don't need another degree. During that first session, I began to learn about mission work. One day, I was reminiscing about my own seminary training. I remembered that when my seminary class graduated, there were a few of my classmates, a very few, but a few, who went on to become missionaries. What I didn't know at that time, they had to go to mission school after seminary. And it occurred to me that was what I was doing 2 weeks at a time, several times a year, for 3 years. Honestly, it changed my life. It changed that church in Detroit. And God changed the lives of hundreds of families. During this process, I recognized a major weakness that is a part of many denominations in America. It's the truth. Most pastors trained in Bible colleges and seminaries are equipped literally to manage churches. And they get a good education for that objective, no question. However, they do not get much training about how to reach lost people. It began to occur to me that something was very wrong and dangerous for the future of Christianity in the U.S. And this is long before what's very well known today as the decline of Christianity. Somehow we have believed the lie that the real mission field is exclusively way over there, somewhere far away. This lie presupposes another untruth. and that is everyone in America is a Christian. We just need to put a sign out in front of the church and invite them to our congregation, and meanwhile, we just manage the church. This kind of thinking has a tragic result. Most American pastors get little or no training in missiology, the study of effective mission and outreach. The sad result is an awful reality. Pastors can't train church members to be missionaries to unchurched people in their own social networks. Eventually, a large part of the North American Christian movement is doomed to decline. It seemed to me at that time that there will come a point when the statistics can't be ignored. The Christian movement will lose any grip it had on American culture. And I'll tell you what, that time has now arrived. Indeed, over the 30 to 40 years following that situation, we see the aging and decline of the Christian movement. And it makes me wonder, maybe you too, it makes me wonder, why does God allow challenges like this? The more you think about it, challenges, when they get bad enough, produce a felt need. That need is a recognition that Christianity is losing a good portion of generations of people in the United States. And some of those people might be your own adult children. And that felt need provides an opportunity and openness for Christians to ask hard questions and have a willingness to learn how to do mission. Sometimes what seems like the end is the way God gets our attention for a new beginning. And the felt need we all sense in an increasingly secular nation ignites mission opportunities. And there are many. And one of those opportunities can be described as woke schools. Today, the news is filled with emotional outbreaks about the issues of woke schools, liberal school boards, and unsafe environments in many educational systems. This conversation, though quite heated, provides a huge opportunity for churches and for the mission to reach children and whole families for Jesus Christ. In practice, this is a great opportunity for congregations to provide a daycare, a preschool, elementary education, not just for the children in their own church or from other churches, but as an outreach to unchurched families. Sadly, Christian schools today rarely reach their mission potential. Why? Church staff, congregational leaders, preschool and day school personnel, as well as daycare workers and key church leaders are not trained in basic mission principles. And it's not their fault. You see, there are many dimensions to missionary thinking. One of the key elements that opens the door for reaching those far from God and introducing them to Jesus is the concept of meeting a felt need. That's a need that people strongly feel, meeting a felt need. There are perhaps millions of unchurched parents who want their children to be taught in a safe, moral environment, and they are willing to pay for it. The challenge? Few churches see the outreach mission potential, and most do not have the critical training to make it occur. This brings me back to my own story. Here's how it began. When I first arrived in Detroit, we visited some African American families with our evangelism team. We would present the gospel outline and invite them to our church. But my mission training changed that direction completely. Instead of trying to tell people about Jesus and encourage them to come to our church, we began to meet with these families in our community and ask them, what could our church do to help families like yours in this neighborhood? We were actually asking in so many words, what is your greatest felt need? It's not rocket science. The most frequent answer had to do with elementary education for their young children. Most of these young families said that the local Detroit public schools, including the one in our neighborhood, was not teaching their children at a level of their satisfaction. Most of these parents had a vision that their children might be the first in their family history to go to college. Through the local news channels, I had learned that the Detroit public school system wasn't the best. We had a public grade school within 2 blocks of our church. So I visited the principal and I asked, would it hurt your school if we started an elementary school in this community? To my surprise, the principal responded that it would greatly help his school. He explained that the classrooms in his school were significantly overcrowded. He said, our teachers can't teach with so many kids in one classroom. We are technically a school, but we spend most of our time as glorified babysitters. The Detroit public school system doesn't have the funding to build more schools, he said. And then he said, to my surprise, I'm not a churchgoer myself, but you know what? I would contribute money to the startup of your school. It would help mine. We began teaching basic mission principles that I learned in mission school, and we began teaching our church staff, our church leaders, potential school staff, and some of our church members who shared the vision. Within several months, and at some significant expense to change the facility to meet code for a school, we launched an 8th grade school, kindergarten, and preschool. Our all-white church began to reach out to African American families in our community. And today, decades later, that church is a growing, vibrant, all-black congregation in a community that is 95% African American. Your challenge may not be in a cross-cultural situation, but at a time when woke liberal concepts are disrupting parents and families and school board meetings, your church has a significant outreach opportunity. However, it takes careful mission planning. This is not a build it and they will come approach. Some may come because it's safe for their children. However, most will not become Christians unless you provide mission-level training. When our school opened, even though we charged tuition as reasonably as possible, it was immediately filled. We were a 100% Anglo church with a preschool, kindergarten, and 8 grades that were 95% African American. Meanwhile, our church began to attract African American families to worship. We met a felt need. That filled the school, but didn't guarantee kingdom growth for our church. So we continued to train several groups in basic mission principles. They included all the teachers and helpers and church staff, all church leaders, several retired church members who operated as what we called classroom grandparents, developing rapport with the children and visiting them in their homes, and several African American parents who attended worship and became members of our church. This resulted in an exponential jump in the growth of our previously declining church. Meanwhile, church leaders from our denomination and our district evangelism leaders came from all over the country to visit our church. The denomination's Board of Education asked me to write a document called Lutheran Schools, Opportunity for Mission, and it was distributed to churches across the denomination. Today, one of the greatest needs for churches is the training of church members in mission strategies. It is not rocket science, yet it is a discipline to learn and practice. We at Church Doctor Ministries have developed a video course called the Send Movement, available from Church Doctor Ministries. We also consult churches to help them reach out. You see, mission is not limited to reaching a different culture. Mission teaching helps church people become missionaries to their own communities, effectively reaching people who are not yet believers in Jesus Christ. This is not an evangelism program. It is learning to reach out using basic mission strategies that help Christians become effective missionaries. It is not about developing another program at your church. It is about continually raising up Christians for spontaneous outreach effectiveness as a way of life. Actually, that's what it means to be a disciple of Jesus.